Hi, I'm Sierra Marie Gerfeo, and I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister and religious educator. And I am here talking with the fantastic J.L. Shattuck, who has just had a book released called The Tending Years. You want to hold that up?
Sure.
Look at that fantastic book. And it is so hot off the press that I haven't even received my copy yet, but I'm really looking forward to talking with her. And I just want to ask you to tell us a little bit about your book.
Sure. So this is a book specifically for parents and caregivers of kiddos between the ages of 2 and 5. Those are the tending years that I talk about in the book, roughly what we know as the preschool years. And it really came out of my work as a nanny and a caregiver for kids within that age group. I was a nanny and a child care provider for about 20 years before I had my own child, working with a lot of different kinds of families and noticing that no matter who I was working with, these years were really, really challenging for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I began to think over that amount of time, if these years are so challenging for every type of family constellation that I'm working with, is there a reason for that? I had studied child development, and what you learn when you're doing that is partly like what kids are doing during certain ages. But in my education, this might be different now, but in my education, we were not thinking a lot about why. We knew what kids were doing roughly, but there wasn't a lot of discussion about what purpose this could serve. And when I became a religious educator, when my daughter was very young, I began to think of it in a spiritual way. Like, what if all these behaviors that are so challenging are stretching us into the caregivers that our children need us to be? What if they're enacting with us these rituals that allow us to be present with them, and we're responding kind of intuitively, instinctively, without realizing what our kids are doing or what we are doing, but in such a way is it grows us together into people who are able to have very strong relationships with our kids as they grow through these new developmental phases.
That is such a great way to reframe the difficulties. I mean, just thinking about generally, we think about the difficulties as like, oh, this is a side effect or an outcome of some developmental stage, but that the difficulties might serve a purpose in and of themselves. That's really interesting. Has that always been the way that you have thought about this kind of thing, or is that something that developed over?
I think one of the things for me is that I'm an autistic person. And what that means for some of us is that we have very clear memories of being quite young. My first confirmed memories are from when I was 15 months old. So I have very clear memories of being a toddler and a preschooler. So there's a lot in here about like, what that meant for me to remember being this age and feeling really frustrated that the adults around me did not understand what I was really talking about, really asking for. And then when I began to, this is a little bit of a me search thing, I think, as often happens.
Mm-hmm.
That I began working mostly with preschoolers because, or even slightly younger kids, because when families need a nanny or a caregiver, it's very often on those days when their kids are not in childcare, or they need to fill that gap between like infant care and going off to preschool. So I just fell into working with very young children. And then I realized, oh, I get to understand what my own motivations were as a very, very young person, because I remember what I was doing and how frustrated I felt, but I don't know why.
Yeah.
I want to know why. And then when I became a religious educator, so I was kind of doing that on my own, 2 decades of time, working in other people's homes and in classrooms, and noticing, oh, this is a pattern where kids are really frustrated, caregivers are really frustrated. What is actually happening? Is there a disconnect that we're having trouble understanding each other?
Mhm.
And when I became a religious educator, I thought, oh, I think there's a possibility that these kids are enacting rituals that we actually taught them. Not all families know their kids from infancy, but whoever is caring for a kid in infancy is teaching this child, this is how we connect, this is how we relate to other people, this is how, things happen between us. And I have come to understand that our preschoolers are always reenacting those things
Mm,
that we taught them. And they shift and they change to allow for us to be able to meet them where they are.
yeah.
Um,
Um,
and that it's this deeply connected, deeply spiritual thing for both parties, but we have to understand what we're seeing.
yeah, yeah. So I remember some work of a minister named Peg Morgan Boyle, who talked about who used some faith development theories to talk about children between the ages of 2 and 6, I think it was, and she describes them as wonder-filled, watching, and what's the third thing that she says? Wonder-filled, watching, and mood sensitive.
Yeah.
Um, and
I
she calls this, what's that?
would say that's absolutely true. That feels
Yeah.
exactly right.
And she calls this phase this phase of development the phase of imitation, and so it lends itself to those rituals. But it's interesting because you have made a connection between sort of the rituals and also the frustration between child and caregiver. So tell me a little bit more of the relationship between what's difficult about this stage and children's reenactment of rituals.
Yeah. So what I would say is the example that I give is that from infancy, we teach kids that, for example, meals are not about food. They're not primarily about food. If you're feeding an infant, a very young toddler, that's mostly about, you're physically holding them, or you're, right in front of them, and you're chatting and you're snuggling and you're laughing together, and there may be eye contact there, and we know there's often skin to skin. And what we say is, eating is how we love each other. Eating is how we connect with each other. And then many caregivers after that infant and toddler stage think, oh, my kid is 2.5, or my kid is 3 now, and we can just have meals. We
Mm,
can just, I can hand you food, you can consume it. This is a task to be done. We are on our way out somewhere. Here's your toast. Please consume it. And then we'll be on our way.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And what we see is kids. So I call it the ritual of unification or reunification. That kids are coming to wherever we're eating and saying, hey, isn't this a connection time?
Mm.
Aren't we supposed to be cuddling while we do this? Aren't we supposed to be chatting and laughing or whatever as we do this?
Because we've already
Um,
done that.
yeah, we already, you taught me that this is what we do. This is a precious time for us together. I'm used to being on your lap, or I'm used to being really held in this, close way. And all of a sudden I'm supposed to sit independently, and I'm supposed to be consuming as a task, you
Mm,
know? And so they get really frustrated because this is not what they learned. And we get really frustrated because we have other things to do.
mhm,
This is just
mhm.
one more thing to do in a day. And
Yeah.
so there's a disconnect there, that we're not seeing the continuation of this ritual that we taught them, that they're bringing it back to us and saying, now this is a time for us to reconnect, how can we do it while we're sitting here? How can we do it while we're on our way somewhere? How can we do it, you know, in a way that feeds us both now,
Yeah.
the same way that it did when I was little and you originally taught me that this is about love and this is about connection and this is about closeness.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so does your book give advice about things that parents and children should be doing together, or?
It's actually the opposite of that, which is that I outline some of the things that kids may be doing. Not all kids do all things. For example, in that reunification ritual, you might have kids who really want things to be the same. They really want that same red cup as a symbol that you remember what they like and what they need, and that this is a reconnection time. And if you're providing that, whatever thing they really, really seem to need, I come at it from the position that if your kid is really wanting something, there's a reason for that. And we can get curious about what that reason is, and we can think about, how does providing that feel to us? Because many people have been taught, well, if they always want the red cup and you always give it to them and they're demanding it, that's going to cause problems. And so they're very reluctant to do that. So I just sort of outline, here are the reasons your kids might be needing certain things from you. But then it's the opposite of advice in the sense that I talk about, here are the things you are already doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
The position that we are responding intuitively. In the same way we teach these rituals intuitively when our kids are teensy tiny, starting from whenever you meet your children. We know there are all different kinds of family constellations. Not everyone is with their kids from infancy, right? But starting from whenever they come to you, you are teaching, like, this is how we love each other, and this is how we connect with each other, and this is what we do to make this a loving place of belonging. You are still doing that all the way along. You might get frustrated, you might be struggling, you might be really tired, but you're still doing it. And here are 3 things, 4 things, 5 things that you are doing intuitively that are meeting your kids' needs.
Right.
Because a lot of people come to these books not wanting to come to them because they feel they're going to be told that here are all the things I'm doing wrong.
Yeah.
And I want to say, here are all the things you're doing right. And here are all the things you have already taught the child in your care.
Yeah.
Teaching all the time. And so really be proud of that. Like, really sit with, like, you're already doing the thing. And here are some things you might not know. And now that you know them, what does that mean to integrate it into, for your family, your setting? What does it mean to integrate what you now know into what you were already doing? Because you are already doing great.
That's so affirming. I mean, I think about the span of my time as a parent and how often I've just felt like, oh, I'm doing so many things in ways that I wouldn't want to do, or, oh, I'm getting frustrated when and just to have reassurance that, like, oh, some of that frustration is normal and is part of the development that needs to happen. And then there's also ways that it can help you understand the spiritual needs of your child and develop a spiritual relationship with your child. And, really affirming also just to think about, I'm already doing a lot of these things like intuitively. And no matter what, I have a kid who came to me a little older, and it was really when my kid was 10 years old and in hockey that the coach pointed out, like, oh, your kid is always looking to you when they're playing hockey, looking to you for reassurance or whatever. And I was like, oh, thank goodness my kid's finally going through this stage where we're making a connection ritual together, because we hadn't had it before. And that was an incredible, thing to kind of realize in the middle of my
Yeah,
kid's childhood.
exactly. And there are people who do say that stages like that of connection do not get missed, that they just get like recapitulated over time in the ways that like child and caregiver need, no matter. So if your kid is not doing that when they're little, and there could be many reasons for that, and all of them are, you know, within the scope of what we see often, um, like it may come back around again because you
Yeah.
need each other. And that's going to happen, you know, whenever it needs to happen. It
Yes.
can be
Yes.
in school years and later, or it can be just later. And you do figure it out as you go along, and that connection exists.
Yeah. I think this idea of like, there's no missed, there's no missed stages. There's just revisiting of various developmental tasks as we need them,
Yes.
is just really, really important, especially in families where there may have been interruptions, whether it's like, hey,
Right.
a parent died and, or there was a traumatic event in the family and it just interrupted, whatever it is that we can.
Or there's neurodivergence, and you have
Yeah.
kids who seem like they may not want to connect.
Yes.
Doesn't mean they're not connecting, and it doesn't mean that you're not.
And it
It,
doesn't mean that over time there won't be forms of that connection that develop according to where everybody's at a particular time.
yeah, exactly. And so I think that one thing that this book does is just show you you are so capable. You
Mm,
are already doing it as a caregiver in a time where we feel so at sea, you
mm,
know, um, am I doing it right? Am I doing what I should do? Am I doing what I'm supposed to do?
yes.
Um, yes,
And
you
did
are.
that mistake I made, did that ruin everything?
Right. I know. It
That's
absolutely,
catastrophic thinking, I guess.
right, but it absolutely didn't.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
right. And this outlines like a whole variety of like challenging and frustrating behaviors that kind of give rise to that feeling for a lot of people. Like, oh, I'm the worst because I didn't respond to this particular thing in a way I felt I should have.
Yes.
Um, you're doing great. You're already, that frustration is the thing that
Mm-hmm.
is growing you into the
Mm-hmm.
person that your child needs long term.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the title comes from, is that we have the word tending has, a couple of meanings and a couple of roots. And we know about the caregiving sense, we know that we are always like tending the children in our care, but it also comes from a root that means stretching.
Mm. Yeah.
Hard. It's challenging. It's
Yeah.
frustrating.
Yes.
And there's a lot of content that, like, to me overemphasizes the like wonder aspect. The like, they're so lovely, they're so curious, yes, they are. Preschoolers are my favorite people in the entire world. And it can be really challenging, even when this is what is happening, this is all part of it, this is growing me, we are kind of growing each other in relationship into the people we're going to be for each other. That's wonderful. And it's hard. And
Yeah.
I think we're better off saying this is really hard,
Yeah.
and it's hard for reasons.
Yes.
It's hard because you're doing it young. It's hard because it needs to be hard for a while as we're figuring out what this looks like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I got to read a little bit of the book from an Amazon preview, I do have to say. And you talk a little bit about the difference, the difference for you between doing professional caregiving for young children and personal caregiving for young children. And I think that's one of the reasons that personal caregiving for young children is so difficult in a way that professional caregiving is not, because that slowing down for ritual is sort of built into the work when you're doing it professionally, and
Yeah.
that acknowledgement of where the child is at and working with the child, where the child is at, is all built into the work. But when you're a parent, you have everything else built in, all of the other relational aspects of the family and the tasks that need to get done and all of the stresses of life and whatever kinds of events happen, and you don't get a break.
Right, there's no break.
Even if you have your child in a preschool program or something like that, you don't get a break because you're still constantly thinking about your children and parenting them in the back of your mind all of the time.
Yeah,
That's the big
absolutely.
difference. So I appreciated that, that, reflection on how different the experience of professional caregiving for children can be. But I think that ritual piece is a lot of it. I have so appreciated in my work, being able to really take time with kids. And one of
Yeah.
the ways that it challenges me in my home life is I have that expectation that I can apply those professional skills into the personal setting. And I
Yeah,
don't do it the same way.
it's not the same. And right. And so that for those of us who came to, doing this as professionals, you're like, oh, this is different.
This is
Uh,
different.
the reason it's different, I found it to be different for me specifically because it was really emotionally fraught.
Mhm.
Because when you're in a classroom setting, even if you're in somebody's home, you can you are loving those children, you are tending those children, you have unconditional positive regard
Yeah.
for what is happening for them, but it's not about you
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
you know
Yes.
you are helping other families you know get the care that they need, and they trust you, and that is such a privilege to be able to do that. But you're not wondering in the same way, like, am I messing up like irrevocably? Is this child gonna be carrying this? And you do. when
Yeah.
it when it's your own children in your own home, it
Yeah.
feels very, very different.
Yeah.
So even if the day to day is pretty much the same, and for me, I was working both as a caregiver, and acting in my role as a parent at the same time. I was
Yes.
working for a family um, where I had my own child was in that care setting. So I had a 3-year-old and a very young toddler, and then my own child who is a teensy tiny little infant. And the rituals of the day were pretty much the same, but
Mhm.
it felt emotionally really, really difficult
Yes.
um, because my choices seem to matter so much more. And
Yes.
I don't think it's true that they did matter so much more, but I felt an enormous amount of pressure to be doing the best thing for everybody at all times. For my own particular child, there was a lot of crying,
Yeah. Yeah.
like so much.
Yes.
And we made it work.
Mhm.
But that's something like, my work experience and my educational experience, they did really help me a lot, but I had to get to a place where they could be really helpful, because that pressure that I felt to be like the world's best mom and the world's best caregiver at the same time,
Mhm.
um, I felt like an amateur all of a sudden. I was like, but I know how to do this. What is happening?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I knew that this is how a day goes. This is how much sleep we're trying to get everybody. This is how, right? I knew how to keep it the same as much as
Yeah.
possible.
You have the skills.
Right. I had all the skills, but it was hard to integrate those skills into my new life because everything felt so pressurized. It was an
Mhm.
environment in which I really felt like, it turns out I don't know what I'm doing at all. Um,
Because it
and
feels hard. Because it feels hard.
yeah, it just felt so hard. And I'm really grateful for that. Um, because everybody comes into it not knowing what they're doing. And if I came in with my education and my work experience, just making it easy, That's not helpful, you
Mm,
know, for me or for anyone in terms of how do I meet the needs of these particular children? Like I had to really start from scratch because with every
yeah,
kid, you're starting from
so
scratch.
different. Hmm.
Um, and that is a wonderful lesson to learn, that I couldn't come in and be arrogant or overconfident about, I know this and I know this and I know this, and this is the way it's going to go because my education taught me X, Y, Z.
Yes.
Um, I had to be with the kids as to be with myself as a new parent who is integrating everything, my education,
Ah,
my experience, these particular kids. And it's really helped me as a religious educator when people come and they're saying, you know, we're really struggling because I know what that's like. I
yeah.
really struggle. And we
Yeah.
all struggle
Hmm.
during parts of our children's development because it's hard. And so that's why it it meant it mattered so much to me to be as affirming as I could. Because when you work with 20 years worth of families and then some, you just hear over and over again, I don't feel equipped. I don't know what I'm doing. It's so heavy. It's so hard. And I wanted people to know, yeah, it is. And you really are doing it,
Yes.
doing so incredibly well. And your kids love that and need that and do feel highly connected to you, even when they're throwing themselves on the floor
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
they're about the cup or whatever. It's all part of it. And if I could wave a magic wand and have it not be part of it and have everything run smoothly for everybody, I absolutely would.
Yeah.
But I
Except we don't
but
do
so
the developmental stretching, right?
I wrote this book instead of making it as
Making it
easy as
better.
possible for people. I was like, yes, it's hard, and here are the reasons why, and you're awesome. You're
Yeah.
doing so great.
Yeah. I think one of the ways that I've sort of like been able to go back as a parent now that I'm coming to the end of my parenting actively of children who are still in really really massive stages of formation. I mean the formation continues, but it's just it's shifting. Um, and one of the ways that I've been sort of able to go back and go, oh yeah, I was actually doing all right, like that was okay, is by caring for young children again. And so when I'm caring for other young children and I'm doing the same things that I did with my kids, and I'm not doing it before I'm parenting, I'm doing it after I've done a ton of parenting, I can go like, oh yeah, like this is such a happy experience and this is so joyful and look at this and this is what we're creating together, me and this kid, or me and these kids, and really be able to affirm, like, oh, it felt really hard, but feeling really hard is not the same as like messing up.
Yes. Yeah. That's so important too to keep in mind is like there it feels really like you feel that stretching.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're out of your comfort zone because you need to meet the needs of these other small people. And you might not feel needs are intuitive. Like a
Yes.
lot of times people are like, well, I don't understand what they're asking for. I don't understand. And all of that is true, but you're meeting the need under the need. Like
Mm-hmm.
the thing you think you don't understand has something underneath it that you do understand, that
Uh,
you are meeting intuitively.
yeah.
And that's really what the book is about.
Yeah.
And so you're doing exactly what you need to do. It may not be joyful every single minute, but there's the capacity for lightness there once you understand, you know, and you it seems like you're finding that like, oh, those things I did, I was intuiting correctly. I
Yeah.
was doing this
Exactly.
instinctively right. And
Exactly.
now other kids get to benefit from your confidence
Mm-hmm.
in having done it before, knowing, yes, there are times that are hard and challenging and difficult, and we can make our way through that.
Yes.
It feels good
Yeah.
for it to not to be so hard.
Yes. So tell me more about the rituals in the book. What are
So
the rituals?
the book has 9 rituals. It takes us through The most important activities in a preschooler's day, which are playing, eating, and sleeping or resting. We begin with eating because that is where we begin with our children that we're caring for when they're infants. It's literally the first thing we try. If a baby is upset, we show curiosity. We try to figure out what's happening for them. And then we feed them, usually is the very first thing. And that is typically the first thing we're doing in a day with child. And so for every ritual, I talk about the source of that ritual. So there are 3 rituals of, eating, and 3 rituals of playing, and 3 rituals of resting. And it's all about, what are they asking of you through their behavior? And how are you responding in a way that, revisits this ritual that you started when they were really little, or that somebody started. If you're caring for a slightly older kid that you did not know as an infant, somebody probably taught the child this that you're caring for. So this is where we are now. So, for example, with the reunification ritual, we learn that, we teach kids that meals are really about connection. And so here are several ways in which they might ask for sameness. They might be being really, really silly with you or not eating at all. And we're feeling like this is meal as task. This is the thing to get done before we move on with our day. So we're like, eat 3 bites, eat 3 more bites, or look at your plate. Look, put the thing in your mouth. Okay, now put another bite in your mouth. Now, and they're just like, I just want to be with you. You are the reason I'm here, not what's on my plate. So that gives rise to a ton of behaviors that are really frustrating at meal times, because we're viewing it in a fundamentally different often than the kids that we're caring for as another thing to do, and they think of it as a time to be with us. And if we can understand that, then we may get less frustrated and feel more equipped to be dealing with what is happening.
So I'm thinking about children who may have particular challenges that are a little bit are not as typical, right? Particular challenges around sleeping, or maybe kids who are too fed and not eating in typical way. What to what extent can you apply sort of the concepts of the ritual and the need? And kids still need reunification, right? They still need the connection regardless of how they're taking in their food. And what you're saying is it's not about the food. So
it's not about that at all.
This could be really transferable.
So however your kid needs to eat, however your kid needs to sleep, however your kid is playing, and because I am an autistic person with an autistic kiddo, the ways that neurodivergent kids are doing things is not necessarily the things that most caregivers are taught counts as play, or counts as a way that would be okay to be resting, or whatever. And so, although the focus of the book is mostly on neurotypical kids, I'm very careful to say, not every child is eating in this way, playing in this way, resting in this way, and that these rituals still exist, no matter what we're looking at in terms of neurotype or disability or anything like that. And those needs still exist. And that's happening.
Still seek to meet those needs, right?
And we're still doing that intuitively no matter what. And so, and a lot of times our autistic kiddos have a higher need for things like sameness, and repetition. And so the majority of kids in this age group have needs for those things. but
Yeah.
our autistic kiddos are going to have them most likely to a higher degree and also for longer. So
Mhm.
some people with slightly older kids will say to me, well, so I expected to see some of that during the preschool years, but my kiddo still needs that degree of sameness and that degree of repetition, to which I say, yes, yep, and so do I.
Yeah.
And so that means you really are dealing with your kiddos on a case-by-case basis. You are doing that intuitively. You are still reenacting these things with them, and they are reenacting them with you.
Yes.
And it might look different for your family, the ways in which that happens, but you're still doing it. And you're still doing a really lovely job.
Yeah. Yeah. Can we pause for a second on just the idea of play at this age?
Sure.
Especially when we're talking about neurodivergence. I've been thinking a lot about play in this 2 to 6 age group. Partly because one of the things I was reviewing, Morgan Boyle's work, this minister that I was referencing earlier, and she talks about fantasy being really important in this age. And I was thinking about that. And I'm not actually like fantasy and imagination. And I'm actually not convinced that that's exactly like the way that we've typically thought about that. Because at this age, that 2 to 6 age, it seems much more that children's play is focused on the imitation. Like they're playing like, oh, I'm gonna pretend I'm cooking like you do, or I'm gonna pretend, like it's just much, I'm gonna get in a toy car and pretend I'm driving like you do. That seems to be much more the case. And that fantasy and the imagination element of play to me seems like it's developing later than sort of what.
Yeah, I would say that feels, yeah, that feels right to me, that it's actually because we do see fantasy and imagination play in the preschool years, but in my experience, it is largely based on imitation. So you see this in classrooms where kids are playing whatever their favorite show is.
Yeah.
It's not generated internally in the same way that kids after age 5, say like 5 to 9 or 5 to 10, we see like, we're gonna be, there's a dragon over there and we're all gonna fight the dragon and we're all
Right.
gonna, it's kind of internally generated. It looks similar, but kids in the preschool age are like, oh, let's play Paw Patrol. And
Yes.
and you're this and you're this. It's based on what they see. And
Yes.
some kids, you'll see a high degree of scripting,
Yes.
which is something that drives so many caregivers like completely bonkers. It's one of the things I talk about in the book is like, why are you, they're bringing you a play scenario and they're like, I'm this person and you're this person.
Here's what you're gonna say.
Here's what you say.
And
I say this,
and then I say this.
yeah,
Yeah.
then you say this. And you're always doing it wrong.
Yes.
You're never right
Yeah.
in those scenarios. And part of the reason for that is kids are never right. Like, we are always in our teaching of them saying, oh, not this way, this
This
way.
way. Do it this
Oh,
way.
it's actually like this. Oh no. Okay. So yeah, so that's okay, but we actually need to do it more like this so stuff doesn't spill or whatever. So in a lot of their play interactions with adults, they are imitating
Right.
the way that we relate to them often.
Yes.
We find it so awful.
Yeah. Because nobody wants to be
So
wrong the
much.
whole game and not be able to vary because we're in a different developmental stage. So we want to be able to like throw a little in, something else into the mix or
Yeah, and you can. So they're either like scripting it out, like I say this and you say this, or they're like, this is a piece of cake. Oh, no, wait, it's not a piece of cake. It's actually a brick for my house. Oh, it's not a brick anymore. It's actually this. And our adult brains often really struggle with keeping up
yes.
with what is happening.
Right.
And so one of those rituals is actually about being the person in charge of what is happening. And we can see as our kids do this, what the world is like for them,
Yeah.
right?
Wow.
They are being, led and taught and corrected a lot in ways that are helpful, but then they're revisiting that with us all the time, or things feel like they're always shifting for them and they don't necessarily make sense, and that shows up
Yeah.
in their play. And so it's all just data for us about like, what are our kids receiving? How does it come out? How do we meet them where they are, with as low a degree of frustration as possible?
Right.
And so, yeah, I do think that the way that we understand what kids are doing sometimes stands in the way of allowing us to actually understand what they're doing.
Mhm, mhm.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I think because kids are such master imitators at this age, it's perfect. It's like we have so much data. Like they just continuously feed us data about what they're experiencing. And like I'm just thinking about, the experience of walking through a grocery store. You almost will always see a parent who's about losing it with their kid because their kid wants to reach up and touch everything, and the parents like, don't touch but that's
Right.
what we're doing in the
You're
store.
touching
Right?
this. You taught me that this is what this environment is
What
for.
we do. Yeah.
And so, so this is all throughout the day. Everything with our kids is look like, if you see your kid doing something and you don't want them to be doing that, look to what you yourself are doing. And have I accidentally taught that we touch all the things in the grocery store? Yes, you have.
It's possible not to do.
And to not teach that.
Yeah.
And so that's where, like, you can figure out a way, well, what things can we touch?
Right.
Where so you
What
don't
job
have
can
to
we
be
give you?
overcorrected. And that applies to like all of life, but it does take some, it does take you needing to have a little bit of time to reflect on, where's this behavior coming from? Is it because they're in an imitative place that lasts a lot longer than we think it does?
Yes.
We talk about that a lot in like very young toddlers, but because it shapeshifts as they grow,
Mhm.
certain things are still imitation, but not in the pure way that we're usually thinking about when kids are like 18 months old. And so, it's not that you're doing something wrong. It's that what you're doing is right. You're just going about your day, and your kids are learning from you. So that's amazing.
Yeah, great. Good on you. Your kids are learning from you.
Yeah, it's so awesome. But what that's going to mean is they are going to touch all the things in the grocery store.
Yes.
So it's both and. It's like, it's so wonderful. And you're going to be really frustrated,
Mhm.
especially if it's like 5 p.m. and you
Yeah,
need to,
and you need to get dinner done
yeah.
yeah.
Right. And so that's what we're dealing with all the time. It's like grocery store as task, meal as task. And they're like, oh no, this is an opportunity for me to be doing what you're doing. And we're connecting while we do it. And that's good. But we get so frustrated because we don't understand that that's what they're doing. And we're in a different developmental place of
Yeah.
like, this is just the next thing I have to do
Yeah.
before I do all the other things.
Task oriented developmental place.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you want people to know about your book? What
I really, really want people to take away from it that it is affirming, that you are doing exactly what you need to be doing, that it is hard. And, I wish it wasn't hard, but if you are struggling a little bit, if you are finding it to be difficult, that's in part, because you're doing what you need to do.
yeah.
And so you don't need to come to this book worried, is it going to tell me I'm doing things wrong?
Yeah.
Is it
Or is
going to
it going
tell
to give me
me
a
that
big list of things that I should be doing that I'm not
yeah,
doing and have time to figure out?
right? Is this about adding in a ton of rituals so that my child has this spiritual foundation? No, it's about what they're already doing, what you're already doing. And so you don't need to worry that this book is going to tell you you're a terrible
Yeah.
caregiver or parent. And that this is something you can take with you as your kid grows, because this keeps happening in slightly different ways all the time.
Yeah.
And so if you allow yourself to be curious when the kids are really little about, okay, what does my kid need? What am I doing already that's meeting those needs? How are we influencing each other's behavior? That is going to be so helpful to you all the way along.
Mhm.
So I do say, like, this isn't necessarily just for parents of or caregivers, with kids in this stage. It still might be really helpful if you're trying to figure out, you have slightly older kids and you're trying to figure out, like, what is happening? Why is it like this? It's because of what was happening when they were younger, and everything just gets revisited time after time after time. And
Yeah.
you are always intuitively, instinctively responding in such a lovely way that really feeds you and feeds them.
Mm, mm. Well, I'm really looking forward to reading the book. I'm so excited for you that has come out. I'm so excited for us to get to learn from you and from the rituals and the ideas that you have created around the rituals of young childhood. Um, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish I would have asked you?
Oh, that's such a good question. Sometimes, because I'm a religious educator, we talk about how this applies to our congregational spaces. And this is mostly for home use,
Mm,
also in classrooms and stuff like that. But I do think it really applies to the work that we do as religious professionals. I do specialize in early childhood RE, so I'm mostly thinking about working with our very, very youngest congregants. But someone might wonder, like, is this book for me if I don't have young kids at home, but I do have young kids in my program. I'm a religious educator, I'm a minister. And I do think it is kind of broadly applicable to all the spaces that we're in, because kids are coming back to our spaces. It's a safe place for them. It's a place of belonging for them. They are reenacting these same things in our spaces that they are at home. And if
yeah.
we know that, we can meet their needs when they come to us.
Yeah, and a lot of times in congregations, because it is a place where ritual is really prioritized and we do the same things over and over, it's a perfect opportunity to meet the needs of kids who are looking toward ritual,
Yeah.
for the ritual in their lives, which they are at this age. They all are. Um, so that actually is a really good that's a really good segue, just to say that part of we're doing a lot of thinking in the congregation that I'm serving as a religious educator about the needs of young children. And we have benefited so much from your work, because you've been making these great videos for young children and these programs for parents of young children that we have used in the congregation that I serve, which is the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Danbury, Connecticut. And we've been thinking a lot about it because we are trying to grow a program for young children. And we're looking forward to welcoming people in our congregation this coming Sunday, which is September 17th. We're going to have a bounce house. We're going to have a fair for families with children. And we definitely are looking forward to welcoming people in Greater Danbury to our community, and to say that this is that we are a community that thinks a lot about the needs of young children, and really has been doing some thoughtful work around how we can support families of young children. So I would invite anybody in Greater Danbury area to join us. But I think this is a tremendous, this book is a tremendous resource for people all over. And I am so glad that you took the time with me today to talk about it, because it's really exciting. And I can't wait to dig in, and also to share this with the families that I work with and give them copies. pass on the word. You're doing great.
Such a joy to to you. And I think it's so wonderful that you're intentionally inviting families with young children and really thinking intentionally about how do we make it a space of belonging
Yeah.
for folks. And so I think people, will feel really loved by that. And I so appreciate you doing it.
I so appreciate all of the resourcing that you've been doing for our work. So thank you again. And I'll shut off the video now. I mean, I'll shut off the recording.